names or character names or both?
I guess both.
Well, I mean, Lucas himself, I mean, there have been literally books written about that. I mean, he's this very interesting process of kind of, you know, working through myth and fiction and Saturday morning serials and stuff in his head and working on sounds to get things that fit together. One of the fun things about the Atlas, and I think every author kind of runs through something like that in making up names or using names of existing characters. One of the fun things in the Atlas was that Dan and I, even though we were mostly dealing with stuff that was already out there, that we had a lot of gaps we could fill, so we got to make up some names. In fact, at my son Joshua, who at the time was, I think he was 5, he one day he was like, "Daddy, I want to make up a planet name." And I was like, "Okay, what do you want to call it?" And I was like, "Oh God, please don't say like, Elmo or something that will get me in trouble." And so he kind of stepped back and he thought to himself, and he goes, "Sarlucif." And I was like, that's a cooler name than anything else I've thought of. So Sarlucif is in the book, and it actually got something to do with a planet in one of the novels, which my son takes inordinate pride of.
Are you still contacting Modi? You still talking to him often?
Yeah, Modi. I just did an article for StarWars.com that included some new maps, and Modi jumped in and helped out on that, and we touched base on things he sees or ideas he has for future stuff. So it's become a nice collaboration. He's a really, really talented guy, and it was a lot of fun to work with him. I hope we can keep doing that in some way.
I hate to bring up crass financial concern, but was he compensated? I was out of curiosity.
Yeah, he was.
Okay.
He was.
Good for him.
How much is between him and Del Rey?
Oh,
but he
yeah.
was, and he deserved it. I mean, he was absolutely invaluable to the book. Dan and I could not have done it without him.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for.
Yeah.
That's what I was
Yeah.
hoping for.
On the map, can you actually point out the Kessel Run?
Yeah.
And if you can do it in less than
I better be able to.
Good question.
It's right about here. It goes from kind of the edge of hut space. It's actually the Kessel Run was an interesting thing because if I thought of it, I would have planted that question. So bless you for that. The Kessel Run is an interesting thing because it's one of those things in the various Star Wars novels, etc. There's like 5 different explanations for it, and eventually, in fictional universes, there's something called a retcon, where you take all this stuff that doesn't work and you think of some new magical explanation that makes it all work. But eventually, when you get too many contradictions, like no retcon is going to work. So we were able to. But I'm sorry, I'm really geeking out. The issue here is like Han Solo says that the Falcon made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs, which is a unit of distance, not time. And in the original movie, you look and Ben Kenobi kind of looks at him and kind of cocks an eyebrow, like, so it looks like the original intent was that Han was kind of talking out of his rear. But that since has been, various people have said that no, what it is the Millennium Falcon has really good computers and Han's a really hot pilot, so that means he can get from here to there like much more quickly because he's going a shorter route and skirting dangers. So the Kessel Run is up there and there's all these black holes. If you're a really hot shot pilot, you can go, if you're a lame pilot, you take like 20 parsecs and you go the safe way. Like if you're avoiding the BQE or something. If you're a really hot pilot, you go right through the black holes and not quite fall into them, and that's 12 parsecs. So it's in the book too. It's surrounded by nebulae too. Sorry. Actually, that one was Chris Rock. Sorry, Chris Rock.
When you have a situation like that, or when you have conflicting information and trying to place a planet, is something more canon than something else? Like is the book, is a certain book more canon than comics or
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's also kind of an inexact science. I mean, mostly what we do is we rely on Lucasfilm. At Lucasfilm, there's a really, really great guy named Leland Shee, who's the keeper of the holocron. A holocron in the Star Wars mythos is basically like it's it's basically like your iPhone hard drive. It's like full of data, and it's used by Jedi and Sith for information. But that is their internal database of all this stuff. And so Leland will either kind of punch it up on the holocron or give you a definitive answer, or else, he would help me and Dan sort through and come up with the best answer. But, in terms of what trumps what, that's a little trickier. I mean, it's a whole range of fact to, was the contradictory information mentioned once and it's something else 8 or 9 times, or, is one source much newer than the other? Is it a throwaway line here and a major plot point here? Sometimes just what's the cooler explanation? But it's really, it's great having Leland and the rest of Lucasfilm help with that stuff. And most of the time they get really into it and come up with some good explanations. And sometimes they're like, would you just let that go? We get there.
Did you guys incorporate any of the stuff that's like fan-made?
No, we had to be really careful about that because Star Wars is all licensed through Lucasfilm. I think like all fictional universes, like if you bring in fan stuff, even if it's really good, there's potential liability there. So we didn't do that. But on the other hand, I mean, Dan and I are huge Star Wars fans, and not very long ago, we were just chatting on. I guess it was a long time ago. We were just chatting on the web about this stuff, and we did a lot of work, and eventually got to write in it. So essentially, Star Lucif is fan stuff. It just happens to have the official seal.
You mentioned that it took quite a while for an atlas to evolve. There's so much geographical information in this fictional world. Were there any other mythical or fictional worlds for which there had been an effort like this? Like, is there enough in Star Trek that they're going to say?
Yeah, there is a Star Trek atlas. I bought it. It's actually Star Wars and Star Trek are funny. Like, I really don't like Star Trek. Every few years I try to watch a Star Trek and think maybe it'll take, and it just never does. So it was like the only Star Trek thing I'd ever owned, and I looked at it and was kind of, it's a really cool book, but it really wasn't what we were doing. It was just plain, just kind of star map after star map after star map. But a really big influence on this book actually was the Atlas of Middle-earth, which came out, I want to say, around 1980. I had one as a kid, and what really appealed to me, and I think what was a huge influence on the Atlas, was that the writer of that, a woman named Karen Wynne Fonstad, had taken kind of, like we had done, all these clues from stuff, and she related it as best she could to what she knew about worlds like the Earth, and tried to make something that was logical and compelling. I mean, she had a bit of an advantage. It is beautiful maps too, but she had a bit of an advantage in that she had mountains and forests and rivers, and a galaxy map, when you come down to it, is dots and arbitrary lines. So it's kind of a bit more of a challenge to give it a same sense of feeling like a real place. But hopefully we pulled that off. Another big influence on the Atlas, weirdly, was the Atlas of Medieval History, which I read in college it's by Penguin, by this guy named Colin McEvety, who I think is like an Oxford Don. He's very dry about massacres and wars and stuff. And but in that one, you'd have like the same map of Europe over and over again, but the borders would kind of shift back and forth. You'd have these huge lines of armies or migrations, and that really stuck in my head too. It was a huge influence. And I think lots of fictional universes now have atlases too. People just really like maps of imaginary places. For some reason, they let you. I mean, in a way, it's kind of like a baseball box score. It lets you kind of relive it again and think about it. And it's also just kind of, it's kind of fun. It's a way to lose yourself in that world, whether it's Neverland or